Hello and welcome to all the men and women of the West. I'm Joe here with me is my co-host Dan.
Hello and greetings.
Today we're going to only do about 29 pages, I believe, for Dragonlance because that's all that's really necessary because it's all that's left of Book 1 of Winter Night. Living Nightmare, cast by the Dragon Orb and Cyan Bloodbane, it's a combination of both, is actually a pretty horrifying thing, but it's also a pretty fascinating thing. We touched on the start of it last time. You have Sturm at the start of this chapter goes, I'm not going to put myself under his protection. Screw Raistlin. Okay, this is where Sturm's being, of course, stupid. Even I have to acknowledge it. He's just, I always knew he'd turn foul. Yeah, of course you do, Sturm. That said, Kitiara also appears for some weird reason. Not sure why. She just does. Flint is trying to help, but the magic spell is having an effect on him by rapidly hitting him with his old age. That said, Goldmoon actually gets a pretty interesting scene. This plot point never goes anywhere, but imagine the possibilities. She tries to heal Riverwind, doesn't succeed because she's doubting in her faith, and that is what's fascinating. And she dies in the nightmare, which, okay, this is where I don't think they should have knocked her up and sidelined her at the start of Dragons of Spring Dawning. No, bring her in against the Nightbringer, I think it is. Basically, the Dark Cleric serving Ariakas. You pit her against him. You have her have a journey of faith, where she initially, in Dragons of Autumn Twilight, has a child's faith. Of course, you have her go through a doubting phase, but her faith will be all the stronger after it is tested. And here we are seeing it tested. This is a great scene with her. I really do like this scene, and yet they dropped the plot point of Goldmoon because they weren't interested in Goldmoon. She was a plot device in the first book, a plot device with a lot of potential as a character, and I really like her, and she's got a lot of potential in the second book. Never goes anywhere. Tanis and Raistlin became, along with Sturm to an extent, and even Huma, became kind of the male face of Dragonlance. They're what you think of when you think of Dragonlance. I think Goldmoon could have been it for Sonya for a female one, but I think Goldmoon could have also been a female character who's iconic and represents Dragonlance. I know it sounds like we're doing nothing but complaining and criticizing, but it's kind of our jobs as critics. But on the other hand, that's not to say the book is bad. No. Winter Night is a great novel. It's just that there's these little plot hooks that are set up, never fulfilled in the next book. Taz tries to help, only to get himself killed because Tika. Raistlin ends up deciding to abandon Caramon under the pretext of, I have gained your strength. Now finally I am as I was meant to be, but for nature's cruel trick. One whole person. How does it feel to be weak and afraid, my brother? That is cruel.
Indeed.
If we actually look back on the first book, he's weak and afraid because his companions want to kill him. His brother's friends want to kill him. And his brother goes, yeah, I'm going to keep exposing you to them. Caramon has an obligation to take Raistlin away from the other companions, and yet he doesn't. So, in all honesty, there is some justice here. Caramon kind of brings it on himself because he's never been weak and afraid.
And that's probably his biggest nightmare. Being weak and afraid, and Raistlin being the only one that's strong between the two.
I don't know about that, but maybe. I'm going to disagree, and it's that exposed to people who don't like him, and Raistlin's now exposing Caramon to danger and whatnot that he doesn't much like either. That said, Sturm, Tanis, and Kitiara discover Caramon, who begs them to protect Raistlin, and Kitiara basically goes, poor Caramon. Somehow I always guessed it would end this way. So my little Raistlin has become truly powerful. At the cost of your brother's life? Never. Poor kid. She's just ice cold. Sturm, though, decides, if I do nothing else, I'll live to kill Raistlin. They discover within the temple giant green dragon Cyan Bloodbane, who is honestly one of the coolest and most terrifying villains in Dragonlance history. Sturm, who kind of locks eyes onto Raistlin, almost goes to charge like a bull, going, Raistlin, by all the gods, you will pay for your brother's life. He springs towards the mage, his sword raised, and Raistlin just tells him, kill me, knight. You doom yourself and the others to death. For through my magic, and my magic alone, will you be able to defeat Cyan Bloodbane.
Well, he is right.
Hold Sturm. Tanis realizes, we need his help.
They're dealing with magic.
And Sturm, of course, goes dumb and says, no, I said before, I will not rely on his protection. Not now. Farewell, Tanis. And you have Tanis. Do something to Raistlin. The knight is in my way. Whatever spell I cast will destroy him too. Raistlin tried to warn him. I like Sturm. He's my favorite character out of this bunch, but him and Raistlin, but he's not being very bright here. Sturm soon hears a great trumpet bellow, then is overwhelmed by his own inadequacies. His sword arm wavers and he drops the sword. and he sinks to his knees, shivering and weeping like a child, as he's overwhelmed by dragon fear. Interesting that he just utterly collapses and fails here. But it's interesting that he asks himself, where was Tanis? He needed Tanis, but he could not find him. And then he thinks to himself that he was not a knight. What did the code mean to him? He had been living a lie, which this is Sturm's insecurities catching up with him and destroying him and eating him up. This is how Cyan really takes him down. Arguably, as a fighter, I think he probably could have stood a good chance, and he might have survived the nightmare, made it all the way to the end, and I wonder if he would have been transported to Silvanost. He probably could have overcome it had he not been overwhelmed by his insecurities in that moment. Oh, and of course there's some Draconians who go to disrespect his corpse. Laurana then appears and, Krynn Kitsiara soon get overwhelmed and killed. Nothing really to analyze there other than Tanis's wavering between humanity and elvishness, between good and evil, agonizing over the choice till he just decides, screw it, I'm tired of this dream. And the only reason I'm kind of going meh is just, it's not that I dislike this, it's that I still would have liked a bit more of a climactic. He basically gets caught between his two love interests, which this is good versus evil, humanity or elvishness, tomatoes versus potatoes. There's no real wrong choice. I'm just kidding. I might have to say tomatoes, unless we're referring to fries or mashed potatoes with cream corn, at which point it might be potatoes that wins out.
I mean, especially when mashed potatoes is a little fried.
Yeah, that also helps, but I prefer it plain. Or there's crispy potatoes. Those are always delicious.
Oh, yeah.
Kitsiara or Laurana?
PlayStation versus Xbox.
Yeah, one of the faithful great choices. Howard or Tolkien? Blondes or gingers? What is the answer? I'm afraid not even the greatest of philosophers knows. We're trolling at this point. Anyways, back on topic. Raistlin defeats Cyan, which is impressive. Revelation that Raistlin's back in his red robes. And in the next chapter, Tanis questions Raistlin, shaking him, and Raistlin tells him, the dragon is gone. The orb sent the dragon away when it realized it could not defeat me. As for the others, I do not know. You lived, half-elf, because your love was strong. I lived because of my ambition. We clung to reality in the midst of the nightmare. Who can say with the others? And that's what they cling to all their lives. Tanis to his love for Kitsiara and Laurana, respectively, and then much more Laurana later. And Raistlin clings to his ambition, even as he sacrifices his soul. Funny enough, it's only when he casts away his ambition and chooses love that he finally wins out in life to an extent and redeems himself right before he passes. Caramon's alive then, Tanis said. This is where Tanis tells him, because of his love, with his last breath, he begged me to spare your life. Tell me, was this future you say we saw irreversible? Why ask? Would you kill me, Tanis? Now? I don't know. Perhaps. Raistlin smiled bitterly. Save your energy. He explains and I imagine the Kreia actress could have voiced Raistlin here. I know she's a lady, but still. This is the sort of line that she would have said. The future changes as we stand here, else we are the game pieces of the gods, not their heirs, as we have been promised. Kreia herself is a very fascinating character from KOTOR 2, but she's not really an original character. She's basically a derivative from Raistlin Magir. Raistlin's the OG Kreia. That is where, as an archetype, she borrows entirely from Raistlin, and that is where Raistlin in some ways is the superior character because he's the OG. But that said, he's not in Star Wars. This is far from over. We must find Lorak in the Dragon Orb. Alright, they have to find the imbecile. I don't know how else to describe Lorak. He's just not very bright. How did this guy pass the test? That said, Raistlin is soon confronted by Caramon, who rushes to his side to aid him after heaving a shuddering sob. Raistlin, he's not surprised at Caramon's support, but on the other hand, Tanis is a little, which who could blame Tanis, because Raistlin don't screwed up in that there nightmare of his when he kind of left Caramon to die. Although there's something a little funny. You have Lorak, who sits on his throne motionless, head thrown back and mouth wide in a silent scream. Is he alive? Tanis asks. You have, yes, undoubtedly to his sorrow, because he's enduring torments and nightmares beyond anyone's imagining. Lorak tried to take control of the Dragon Orb. He was weak, and the orb called in Cyan Bloodbane to guard Silvanost. And the dragon decided, what the heck, I'm going to wreck the place. And then decided to slip nightmares into Lorak's spirit, and Lorak's belief in the nightmares was so strong, and his empathy was with his land so great that he basically made his nightmares real. And it was his nightmares that the companions traversed through as they stepped into Silvanost. And it's Raistlin who reveals this, and the thing about this nightmare is you can regard it as metaphor for life, sure, but there's also the fact that Lorak has enforced upon this Silvanost is his vision for the world to an extent, in that he has allowed himself to become dominated by fear. and hate. And these emotions twisted and perverted him. So the other factor is that he's not the rightful monarch, if you go by Celtic beliefs, because a legitimate monarch does not twist the land. Actually, the land grows green and has a great harvest. Lorak represents a shadow kingly archetype, and this is also cemented by the fact that his kingdom has become lifeless and perverted in a husk. It is not the kingdom it was meant to be by Silvanost, as he never intended for the kingdom to be this isolationist and anti everyone else. This was his grandson who enforced it on the Silvanesti. Lorak is kind of a victim of his own flaws and insecurities, which have rebounded upon himself, and he has given them life in a way. Tanis, of course, accuses Raistlin of having known what they were walking into, and Caramon tells Tanis, leave him alone. And Raistlin says, perhaps not. I need not reveal my knowledge or its source to you. Which, at this point, one has to bear in mind, Tanis has brought this suspicion and secrecy on Raistlin's part upon himself, because he kept allowing others to accuse. Of course, Alhana steers, and Alhana ends up apparently having broken free from the nightmare because she refused to believe in it. Hero worshipped her father so much. Her love for her father overcame all else. She was thrust into an observer's position. This is where one could say she did not escape the nightmare in a way. What happens to her is she's made to watch as the land is twisted and perverted, and watch her father degrade and be destroyed by Cyan. The thing is, this is kind of her future when she goes to marry that worthless piece of Porthios. She is essentially all but beaten down into submission and forced to watch as her husband destroys her inheritance, his inheritance, and I blame him entirely because it is his fault. Well, I like how there's a slight interaction between Tanis and Raistlin, where Tanis goes, is he dead? Who? Oh, Lorak? No, I don't believe so. Not yet. He doesn't care. That's where Raistlin's insensitive, and it's just, oh gosh. Tanis goes, is the orb still in control? And Raistlin tests it with some magic, just being careful not to touch it. But Lorak was driven by desperation, but he seriously thought he could control the orb, which was a foolish thought. Do not fear, Raistlin tells Tanis. The globe is enchanted still. Its magic has not died with the passing of the dragon, as I thought possible. It is still in control, however. Control of Lorak, control of itself. It has released Lorak. Lorak soon awakens, screams a thin wailing scream as he twists and writhes on his throne till Alhana shows up, and he of course begins to calm down. Although initially he doesn't believe reality because
he's been stuck in
nightmare realm for so long that honestly he's a very pitiable character here. I just think it was really foolish of him to try the dragon orb.
Very foolish, but he did not deserve
to be tortured the way he was? No. Heavens no. And the sad thing is Silvanesti is not to recover. Because there's this. It is his fault for trying the dragon orb, but at the same time, I have pity for him. But then you have Porthios, which I would argue better to leave Silvanesti to the dragon orb and Cyan Bloodbane than ever fork it over to Porthios. Honestly, Commodus was a better emperor than Porthios was ruler of Qualinesti and Silvanesti. I am serious when I say that. Porthios is just such a terrible leader and terrible person. You, Lorak snarled. You half-elf. I killed you, or tried to. I must protect Silvanesti. I killed you. I killed those with you. But then he sees Raistlin. But you I could not kill. And there it's pretty funny. But then he goes, your robes are not black. Who are you? Kind of collapses. The next thing of note that happens is a very tragic discussion between Lorak and Alhana. And the sad thing about Lorak, this is where I really pity him, ends up observing the orb, thinking back on the nightmare. Lorak is dying. As he's dying, he's tasting the bitter tears of failure as he realizes he was neither as strong as he once wished he was, nor as courageous as he thought he was. And speaking very personally, I've tasted that kind of failure where I realized I'm neither brave nor strong. It's a very bitter moment when you realize it and you taste that degree of, and where you have no one to blame but yourself. It is a very embittering moment, but on the other hand, there's some wisdom that comes with it. And it's not a feeling I really would wish on a lot of people. Honestly, on this read through, I found Lorak probably one of the most tragic characters. And I actually really do feel a lot of pity for him. I actually think that in this moment, he'd probably be a great ruler if only he had lived. And that's the tragedy, that he's dying. Because if he were to live a bit longer, yes, he saves his soul, but if he lived longer, he'd be able to take this wisdom, this humility of his that he's newly discovered and help the Silvanesti so much more. But that said, it is a failure of his own making. And I do understand that, and it's not a fun feeling. Loraku asks his daughter, will our people return, Alhana? Of course. A lie, my child? Since when have the elves lied to each other? Lorak is in an interesting position, but we'll get to that in a minute. Alhana tells him, I think perhaps we may have always lied to ourselves. Decides, okay, fine. I won't give my dad white lies then, since he doesn't want that. All right, we've always lied to ourselves. The ancient gods did not abandon Krynn, father. A cleric of Mishakal, the healer, traveled with us and told us of what she had learned. I did not want to believe, father. I was jealous. She is human after all. Why should the gods come to the humans with this hope? But I see now. The gods are wise. They came to humans because we elves would not accept them. For our grief, living in this place of desolation, we will learn, as you and I have learned, that we can no longer live within the world and live apart from the world. The elves will work to rebuild not only this land, but all lands ravaged by the evil. Alhana will never live to see that oath fulfilled. She will be enslaved by Porthios and forced to watch as he squanders her legacy and denies her and her people this mission.
Her family doesn't deserve that.
When it comes to Porthios, I wonder what was the point of even resisting Ariakas. There are times I'm like, maybe it would have been better had the Qualinesti and Silvanost been wiped out. Or maybe it would have been better had Ariakas won. No one could have run Qualinesti and Silvanosti with less interest in the people and the land than Porthios. Even Kitsiara has more interest in it than him. He's a fairly realistic ruler in that he is one of those corrupt rulers who comes at the end of one empire or country and says, well, I wonder how I can run it into the ground and destroy it and grind my people into the dust. These moronic, evil people occasionally pop up. They're spoilt and stupid, and they pop up and they destroy their own country. And then it's up to a sibling or a child of theirs or a cousin or something to basically pick up the ashes and try to make something of it. The sad thing is Alhana is to suffer because of that. And if I rail against Porthios so much, I just think that Alhana got a raw deal. And she vows to work and toil and to ask for forgiveness of the gods. That said, Lorak then says, I give myself to the land. Bury my body in the soil, daughter. As my life brought this curse upon it, so perhaps my death will bring its blessing. This is where, in a way, he was a shadow king, and thus he was not able to heal the land. But the idea is that in death, he will become the king in his fullness. He will heal the land that he so damaged with his insecurities and his falseness. And this is where he is the king he was meant to be, in a way. And I say king because, well, I know he's speaker of the stars, but in this moment he is a true speaker. He's a true king. He's a true worthy heir to his ancestors. His daughter is horrified by his request because the land has been perverted and tormented, but she agrees. Raistlin, the next day, who decides, all right, listen, we got to take possession of the dragon orb. We can't just leave it here. And the other companions resist a little. Alhana offers him the pouch that her father carried the dragon orb in. He tests it, determines it is magical, turns to Cameron, go and bring me the orb. And at this point, you have Caramon who says, not for any treasure in the swirl. I don't blame him.
Yeah, it's like after what that orb has done to the previous one who touched it.
Yeah, and you have Raistlin. Oh, don't be a fool. The orb cannot hurt those who do not attempt to use it. Believe me, my dear brother, you do not have the power to control a cockroach, let alone a dragon orb. Which, that's pretty funny. Raistlin just explained. All right, don't worry. It's not going to do anything to you. But it might trap me. No, he just finished explaining and he can't. It seeks those with... Yes. Go on. Who does it seek? Like, come on. Tanis, why are you sounding like a supervillain? The reason I'm saying he's sounding like a supervillain is just... There's almost no other way to read it. Tanis does have killing intent, as the Japanese would call it, towards Raistlin there. And Raistlin snaps at him. People with intelligence. Therefore, I believe the members of this party are safe. But actually, given that Raistlin's the team, not carrying the team, he is the team, they do have reason to fear if it's only going to prey on those of a brain. At which point, Raistlin ends up deciding to challenge them. Bring me the orb. Or perhaps you want to carry it yourself. Are you half-elf? Are you cleric of Mishakal? And everybody basically gets... uncomfortable. And Caramon looks uncomfortably at Tanis, waiting for his approval over Raistlin's, showing the truth. And this sort of thing is what fills Raistlin with rage. But as we see, it also fills Raistlin with regret and pain, as his own brother rejects him categorically. The stupid thing that Caramon says, I can't race when he's told to drop the orb into the bag. It won't fit in there, it'll smash. When this is a magical artifact, it's unlikely that it could smash so simply. The other one smashed on a holy rock, blessed by all the gods, so... And there's also the element of the Kender, so there's no way that was an ordinary situation. That aside, Raistlin does end up saying, when he's asked, things can never be the same between us, can they? Raistlin looks at him for a moment, and he has a flicker of regret and a longing for trust and friendship and a return to the days of youth. The thing is, Raistlin deep down regrets what he did, but he sees it as, I paid a price. I have to take responsibility. How very American of him. But the thing is, Caramon has obviously turned away from Raceland to a large extent. I will ask, had he already begun to turn away from him before the nightmare, or is it this something that was exacerbated by the nightmare? I'll say he was already starting, but the nightmare accelerated things.
I'm of the same opinion.
They offer to help Alhana later with the funerary rites for her pops. She says no. She thinks you're not going to want to be around to see me bury my father in a custom practiced only by goblins and other evil creatures. Now, apparently the thought appalls her. She decides to tell a lie. His tomb is long prepared, and I have some experience of these things myself. Do not worry about me, please. Well, it's not exactly a lie in hindsight, but it's a sad thing. Tanis then asks her, after you bury your father, what then? And she explains she'll go off to be with her people and take care of them, do what she can to help them defeat this evil. Then they'll return home. And she explained that healing Silvanost will be their penance, which is a pretty heavy penance. He tries to press upon her the importance of love. He guesses that she's struggling to learn to love a human. She asks him, would he be happy, Tanis, away from his homeland? For I must return to Silvanost. And could I be happy knowing that I must watch him age and die while I am still in my youth? And Tanis tells her, I asked myself these same questions, Alhana. If we deny love that is given to us, if we refuse to give love because we fear the pain of loss, then our lives will be empty, our loss greater. That's wise. That's Tanis at his wisest. Very true statement.
There's a reason why she comments that she sees why he is the leader of the heroes.
They wish her well, and they take off. They leave the forest behind. Alhana left to mourn. This is honestly one of the most heavy parts to read. Something that makes for really, really good reading. And it does get you thinking. There's a lot of heavy stuff here, and we can make entire videos, and we probably will one day, make entire videos just on the events within the nightmare. Any other thoughts you want to discuss?
This was a very dark part of the story. Very well written for the most part.
Tell us what you think, and don't forget to smash that like and that subscribe button as though you were the gods hitting Krynn with all their smashing a meteor into Ishtar.